Well, I hope you've been enjoying the custom maps because it's back. Welcome back to EGC TV for more custom match combat. We are here with a 5-game series between LucifroN and Kasva. 3 already done. If you haven't seen them, check them out after this one because they are looking like pretty crispy, sexy maps. But now, well, we're going to have to sex it up by heading to the Dutchlands here as game number 4 will take place on Frisian Marshes, a map brought to us by the most wonderful Adney. That's right. We're looking like fanboys right now, Lidakor. This is 2 in a row for him.
Indeed, 2 in a row. Adney, one of the most active map creators of the Age of Empires 4 map making scene. And this map is essentially going to be what Ancient Spires wanted to be in the original game. It also has some fish dynamics, but it's a completely different story from what you're used to because you won't be able to place docks over here. Very open, very aggressive land map with a bit of a spice using some shorefish. But let's take a look at this map ourselves. Let's jump straight into game number 4.
Here we go. For those wondering, like, well, why these players playing, why should they take it serious? We are paying them. We're not Red Bull Wololo land money, but like we're paying them. I believe it's $20 per map. So every map matters. We will be doing all 5. So if, for example, LucifroN wins this one and it's free, don't be deceived by the best of 5. We are doing 5 maps total, and the idea is that after we're done with these, we're going to talk about it and figure out what 2 maps to add to our rotation for the road to Red Bull Wololo. So these maps are going to matter, and it's why we want to see your feedback in the comments. But you know what they call this Frisian Marshes, right, Lidakor?
Yeah, like part of the equation, and this is something we have to be very clear about. The original name of this map was Frisia. However, there is a map called Frisia in Age of Empires 2, and it's a completely different concept. Fun fact, it was, I think, made by the same person who is developing the back end of our stream overlays, but that's a side story. The more important part is that the map looks very different, and in order to avoid confusion, this map had to be renamed to something else, and Frisian Marshes became the ultimate name for this map.
It's actually pretty appropriate. You know why Dutch people are so tall, right, Lidakor? It's because the country was always flooding, so, babies had to get tall real quick. All right, that's a terrible little joke. I heard that. It's not inappropriate. I heard that from a Dutch person before, which is I just remember it made me chuckle. But look at these ponds, by the way. They are thriving with fish life. This is curious because they're shoreline fish. And when you made the comparison to Ancient Spires, it's an interesting one because I think that is the goal here. Ancient Spires, of course, a map that was deemed kind of too inconsistent and buggy to be allowed in competitive play in most cases. This is only shoreline fish. The reason I'm going to keep coming back to that detail is because, well, I don't think you can fit docks on here, but even if you could, you wouldn't. You'd do this instead. This is going to be remarkable. Remember, shoreline fish is the fastest way for villagers by default to gather fish. They gather at 1 food per second. That is 0.1 food quicker than a boar.
And this is where you can see the concept behind of this map. It's a very open map in those middle areas, a lot of small ponds that you simply can't dock. So you have to move out with villagers, like Kasva is doing, and just fight for those ponds, because right now it's safe. But how about in 5 minutes? In 5 minutes time, we're going to see armies roaming the map, hunting for those villagers and the shorefish. And honestly, I think French might be the best civilization pick here of all the possible options. Cheaper mills, the ability to go for a ton of early aggression using those knights. This is going to be a really good combination for Kasva. Look at the amount of food he's piling up already. That's going to be brutal. Of course, LucifroN also has a good food eco, but I think that's mostly based on berries right now. And there's way less berries on this map than you have from shorefish.
Yeah, I like you bring up the French here, because like the word I always use, they're tempo aggressors. A tempo aggressor, for those that don't know, it's someone that essentially they play aggressive to control the timings in the game. And the way the French do it is through dynamic midfield control. What I mean by that is they go cavalry, right? They regularly go for French knights. The reason this is important is because it allows you to react to aggression a lot better than most other civs, and also means you're usually playing more up into your opponent's face, which is why they will get away with what Lidakor was talking about these little ponds here, because the French have for a long time been the #1 civ for doing pocket economies. A pocket economy is where you build away from your main base. And one of the weaknesses of the French is most players don't like to build outposts to defend it, but in these type of matchups, on this type of map, I could see it being very advantageous. That isn't to write the Delhi off entirely, though. I think this has been one of the most interesting matchups to watch on Dry Arabia because both these civs leverage the feudal age heavily for aggression. One side with knights, and the other typically with horsemen and spears towards those sacred sites.
Yeah, that's a great point that you bring up, because indeed, one of the similarities that you can find between the French being used here and Dry Arabia is that you are the aggressor with your knights, which also gives you quite a lot of map control and safety to move out for these pocket ecos. And this is exactly what this map is all about, moving out for that shorefish, so you have a very consistent, reliable, and very effective food income. So if Kasva can maintain himself being the aggressor, then he will have access to that deposit of shorefish on the right side of the map. But as you pointed out, LucifroN with the Delhi, it's also a very powerful civilization when it comes to feudal age aggression. And you see, LucifroN is opening with the berries right now. That doesn't mean he won't move out for the shorefish. It just means that he needs to build up the critical mass of Delhi spearmen and horsemen before he moves out to contest map control. And notice that the two sacred sites are actually relatively close to those lakes, so we could see that timing come into play with the Delhi, where you just build up your critical mass, move out, and while you secure your sacred sites, you also bring villagers to secure yourself those pawns.
Absolutely, you can see both players making their way up, and to kind of highlight that situation on shoreline fish versus berries a little bit more like directly. When you're playing as the Delhi, you gather, I think it's about 0.85, 0.86, right? Because you get 0.66 food by default, but then you have to add in 30% on top of that. So while the shoreline fish are still better, the differential is a lot smaller. The reason the French want to go here is the increase in value compared to being on sheep or berries is substantially higher than the difference between Delhi's berries and shoreline fish.
Yeah, that's exactly it, and you're right about the numbers. It comes out as like 0.85 or so for the Delhi on the berries.
I think I remember it, like, I don't know, I need to, I sometimes screw the numbers, but I think that's right. So if you think about it realistically, like, you're getting 0.15 food extra, which is, it adds up to a lot when you got like 10 plus villagers doing it. But then you have to, it's all about risk association, right? Like if I'm doing the risk analysis of like, well, what are the chances this pays off and what are the gains, right? You want high risk, high reward, or you want low risk, low reward. And the problem with doing this for LucifroN is it's high risk, low reward. So it just makes more sense to play berries instead until he at least has a good defense force. And it looks like he's actually going very defensive here. Only spears, no horsemen coming out yet from the Delhi player.
Indeed, he's going for a very defensive approach over here, but Kasva's gonna be more than happy with that, because this means that Kasva has essentially infinite access to that shoreline fish, and that's going to boost his food eco. And right now, LucifroN is unable to put up any aggression to that food eco, as compared to Kasva, who can get some raids going on those berry villagers. Textos has been completed by LucifroN, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Kasva to pick off those villagers with. And look at what Kasva is doing. He's not going for archers over here, which is something that you commonly see from the French to accompany the knights. He's going for spearmen himself.
Yeah, I like this, actually, because the problem when you're dealing with the Delhi is they eventually just build up a ridiculous clump of horsemen and spears, typically, and then zerg you. So he's just trying to get the good mosh pit going so you can just keep pressuring, because realistically, now that he's playing fish, as long as he's playing fish and LucifroN isn't, he should actually be able to build up more troops over time. You have to remember that Delhi's big eco advantages. First, number one is berries. Berries are really good. But step number two is sacred site control. And Kasva, if both of them are just going for food, he should be able to get better food gains, and it means he should be able to actually block that secondary eco condition for LucifroN, ensuring he never gets the gold trickle from the sacred sites.
Yeah, indeed, that's a great point. We could even see some towers being dropped there in the near future by Kasva. Behind this one, LucifroN is also moving out for those spawns, so he needs to start switching away from those berries that are slowly getting depleted inside his base, starts to move out for the shorefish on the right side as well. Bit of a harassment coming out here from the scout, but that is gonna be a scout lost by LucifroN. He's down to just one. Now adding an archer range as a response to the spearman. Army's looking pretty comparable right now. Not sure who has the edge in this one. I get the feel that it's the French, because the only major difference is the villager count. That is something that the French will always have the lead in against the Delhi.
Yeah, the problem that LucifroN has is that because Kasva went on food soon, on the fish sooner, and he has more people on fish, and also he can afford to have more people on because he's generating villagers quicker, he's always going to stay ahead in the food production, in the food gathering. And you can actually, if you look at the numbers right now, like you saw if you look at the food income, it's deceptive because Kasva had just had idle time killing that scout. But in the next minute, like he should exceed LucifroN's income. In fact, if we look at the fish line that LucifroN has going right now, even with the fact that it'll eventually get the gathering rate increase because you passively get them to Delhi, he has maybe 6 people on his fishing line. Meanwhile, Kasva, he's got multiple fishing areas active. You can see this is ridiculous. He has 3 times the amount of people fishing that LucifroN does.
And part of that, of course, is the French discount on the mills, which may not seem like it's a big boost, but in this scenario, it's actually pretty massive that you can just drop 2-3 mills and have like 15 villagers out there. We also have to keep in mind something very important. Kasva moved out with the villagers early, so there was no chance of LucifroN doing any damage to them in Dark Age. But this time around it's different, because now you're looking at Feudal Age with knights roaming the map, even though you only have 2 knights out now for Kasva. But those are still dangerous to the villagers that LucifroN could send out, and that's something that LucifroN has to respect.
Marie, what are you doing? Run!
Nope.
She's like, no, Daddy never taught me how to swim. okay, we'll come help you out. So LucifroN right now is starting to leverage this fight in the center by distracting with that backstab force. And one important detail to remember the Deli do have is these scholars. Usually when you stop the Deli, when you deny them, like we highlight the fact that you could maybe take out the berries is good and stop them from getting sacred sites is good. But the most efficient way to deal with the Deli right now is if you aggress their gold vein. And the weird part is actually that if you look at the location of the gold vein, that maybe would have been an option for Kasva, but he never fully indulged it. The gold is located towards the forward of LucifroN's base, so it could have been somewhat exposed, but because LucifroN went early onto the spears, that opportunity would never existed for Kasva, and it meant that Deli got to access the power spike in Feudal.
Indeed, and the sacred sites now will be controlled. Both of them are actually very close to one another, so LucifroN can maintain control over both, which actually puts Kasva in an even more concerning position, because that sacred site countdown will also begin. Now obviously, that's not the win condition LucifroN is playing for, but he won't be disappointed if that countdown goes down to like 5 minutes, and suddenly Kasva will need to have even more sense of urgency to decap one of those sacred sites, as compared to, let's say, playing Arabia, where one player has 2 sacred sites.
Exactly. We're starting to see the Zerg factor come in for LucifroN now. You can see it in the military pop cap difference. And the thing is, he can keep maintaining his numbers, but now he gets gold trickle. The fact that he's actually exceeded Kasva's number without the gold trickle does not bode well for him. And I was kind of intrigued as to why LucifroN had picked it here. Because the issue with Deli is, like, usually you want to pick them on triple sacred site type maps. But I think it's when you think about the structure of these sacred sites, only one is logically contestable. Even for a civ like the French, you're more likely to play over the central one, and it means that LucifroN could just direct all efforts there. Once he walls this one up like this is just free gold trickle. It's going to be almost impossible for Kasva to stop it. So he's going to secure this area, and then he can just fight tooth and nail for the next God knows how long over the closest sacred site to both their bases.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, it's the matter of number of total sacred sites as compared to number of safe sacred sites, or number of sacred sites you can easily control together. And on this map you do have 2 sacred sites that you can easily control together, especially because you do have one of those sacred sites now walled in. As you pointed out, is the Zerg factor coming in from LucifroN, because he's got a reasonable amount of archers now, and Kasva only sitting on 5 knights right now. He's got 16 archers as opposed to 17, but LucifroN is building up a considerable military mass over here, and you see that the snowball factor could start to come into play here soon, because the Deli player also has access to the shorefish, and he also has access to the sacred sites now, so his eco is actually going to be better than the Kasva's one.
Although, looking at this fight, with good micro, Kasva could come out ahead. The problem is the Scholars can't be answered. 8 in the field. This is just looking one-sided. He can't fight. He can't boom up. Like, it feels too late to back away now. Kasva also didn't fully invest. Look at his resources. He's saving up for Castle, throwing away his army essentially, but I think he's throwing it away too fast here, Lidakor. Usually when you do this, it's because you're in the middle of a tech up. Because he's done it now, if he chooses to go for Castle afterwards, LucifroN could just blitz into his base and spank him where it matters on his eco lands.
Knight still standing though, and looks like the spearman numbers are mostly gone from LucifroN. Suddenly it's only archers, and this is actually a lot dicier than one would think initially, because LucifroN technically still has 5 spearmen, but none of them are actually on the battlefield, so suddenly quite a lot of archers are going down here to knights. The spearmen are only just now making their way onto the battlefield.
But it's the Scholars. The Scholars are the problem right now. He can't target them down. He can't go after them individually because they'll all heal each other. And the Archers, like, they take twice as long to strike, and you have to focus fire with the Knights. And it's why at the end of it, it still works out in favor of LucifroN, because the Archers, with the assistance of the Scholars, become a tank unit. They're a front line in a very weird way, and it works out to keep control over the sacred sites.
And this is so hard for Kasva because he's doing the right things. It's just the fact that, you know, the Deli factor at full feudal age here from the Deli is so powerful. Actually, this is very similar to what you would see from an Arabia game, but maybe even Arabia on steroids, because both players do have a tremendous amount of food eco from the fish. So it's not even like Arabia where you run out of fish or run out of food and you have to transition to farms. Farm transition isn't a thing on this map, so you can just keep spamming out food-heavy units for 2 hours and you still won't run out of food.
Exactly, and it's such good food gathering rates. And I think this benefits the Delhi a lot more than the French, because the food gather rates, like, if you think about what both sides are pushing, where is the heavier demand? Is it in food or gold? It's in food, no doubt. And you can't get a better gold gathering rate. And you need it as Kasva, but LucifroN doesn't. So realistically, like, he doesn't have to diversify as much resource to cover the 3 areas of the triangle, right? The cavalry, the ranged, and the melee. Like, he's fine. He's absolutely fine with just having primarily food and wood. And the gold, while it is needed for the scholars are not expensive. And the value of these scholars per is ridiculous. As you're seeing these fights, just turning these archers into frontline tanks every time. And once again, forcing Kasva away, because after the last fight he took, he realizes he can't afford to lose those knights again.
And you pointed out that there is plenty of food available. You also have plenty of wood available for the Delhi player because he can get those upgrades for free, as compared to the French player who would have to essentially commit a bunch of resources to get the double broadaxe upgrade, for example, most of that being gold. So he needs to decide, do I make early knights or do I go for the broadaxe upgrade so I can pop out archers in larger numbers or spearmen in larger numbers? Everything is just much more streamlined for the Delhi over here because they will have infinite amount of food at very high getter rates to work with, and they also have a ton of other resource income that is wood and gold from the sacred sites, and of course them having access for the upgrades for free, so them having all the feudal age eco upgrades as well.
Also, Kasva's base is very deceptive. If you remember, we saw multiple production buildings, right? Double archer range, double stable plus the school of cavalry, double racks. Now, if you looked at LucifroN's base again, it looked like Kasva should have the production rate advantage, but he doesn't because of production efficiency. Like, LucifroN has turned each of his individual production buildings into a second one because he's doubled the rate at which he's pushing out units. And it means that he's not falling behind despite Kasva's overinvestment in trying to get ahead. It's why the numbers are always favorable for LucifroN. A combination of good fights and the fact that you've actually perfectly matched the production rates of Kasva. And Kasva, now he's going on the prowl, but it was way too predictable. It was seen a mile off. He tries to catch him with his hand in the cookie jar, though, in the middle of a tech up. The best time to strike for Kasva. And he really do some damage here. Looks like it's going to be forced away. It causes a delay in the timing, but folks, Kasva, well, he's miles away. He can't tech up himself. He's got plenty of gold, but the food is somewhat lacking here as he's starting to drain through these fishing departments a little bit too quick on the eastern side of the map.
It is just brutal to think about the fact that he's actually constrained on food rather than gold, despite having access to so much fish. Nice engagements over here for Kasva, though. He actually picks off the spearman, and honestly, this wasn't looking really good for Kasva. It's actually not that bad looking. It might seem grim, but he does have the archers pick off some of these spears, and he's not that far away from Castle Age. This being said, I think he has like a less than 5% chance of winning, but as long as those knights alive, there is a hope.
Thank you, Captain Positive turned negative at the end there. More spearmen coming out, pushed out at twice the rate. And just a few of them will eviscerate this knight line. The archer line, however, is able to brunt the fire from both a ranged battalion and a cavalry battalion. And once again, it's the scholars. The medic here is too strong here. LucifroN with a tech up. Kasva ready to go for his own, but now he's missing a standing army to hold back the tide at Delhi.
Oh man, as long as the armies of LucifroN were split, there was like a glimpse of hope for Kasva, and I was a believer. I was a believer that, okay, if he can split up these armies, pick off the spearmen, and then still maintain those knight numbers, it's gonna be fine. But as you pointed out, all the knights got massacred by the spearmen, partially, of course, fueled by the power of the scholars out there. And now we're looking at 12 army versus 43. Yes, you will be in Castle Age, but LucifroN is also in Castle Age, and he's gonna have a much stronger standing army already.
Yeah, and the thing that's actually interesting, so we talked about food in this map, talked about gold as an exploitable detail because it's for your base. An interesting detail we didn't talk about is the wood lines. You glazed over it temporarily, but something to come back to is these wood lines are some of the safest we've seen on any map we've passed. This is almost comparative to King of the Hill, and I think that's something we're going to have to like assess when we look at Civ choices in the future, because if you're a Civ that struggles to hold onto your wood, or you rely on wood heavily like the Rus, like the English, this might be the map for you. If you play a more greedy style where you want to be condensed, this also might be the map for you because you're less exposed on the side, and those lack of flank attacks can serve you well.
LucifroN tried to
Nah,
get the
I
Wololo on
didn't
the
even
villagers.
talk about it. This
Oh,
one, though. Oh, this one, Kasva. He's going to lose a few villages. There it
yep.
is. Free freebies. Look, don't mind me, boys. I'm
LucifroN.
out here. Oh, and Kasva might be out of this game. Like, he's out of gold as well. Look, oh, wow. This is the worst case scenario. Look at Kasva's gold and look where the secondary gold vein is. He can't get anything here. So if LucifroN holds him in here, even with his tech up, Kasva can't really do what he wants to with it. He can't get hard on the Arbitrators, and he can't get into Knights.
And there's an even
Or
bigger
tech
concern for Kasva. Because look at the countdown on the sacred sites, we're down to 330. And this is the power of that. Like, sure thing, you're not playing for that win condition, but when you can trigger both of those and maintain control over those for most of the time, it actually adds up. And 10 minutes is not that long when you start that countdown in like early mid-feudal age. On Arabia, it's very easy to decap one of those sacred sites because they're so spread out. But on this map, they're much more condensed, so suddenly that win condition could come into play as well.
I mean, honestly, watching that gold line felt like it was 10 minutes. 10 minutes before Kasva reacted. He'll feel like it's putting back 10 minutes because that's all of his eco league gone. And he's still denying the gold. He's got enough for like one tech up. 261 gold isn't good at the start of Castle, folks. And I hope he went Guildhall, but Guildhall's going to take time to accrue the resources. And as you still pointed out, he doesn't have time. With 2.5 minutes away from a Sacred Site victory for LucifroN, and Kasva struggling to find a way in still.
Indeed, and he's really struggling out there because he lost a bunch of villagers, his food eco, that got damaged, his gold income got damaged, and he simply doesn't have time. We're down to 2 minutes over here, and it is 24 army versus 60. And the thing is that the Castle Age upgrades are yet to finish for LucifroN, so he already had the lead. If he gets those Castle Age upgrades in, that lead is going to grow even larger, and Kasva can't afford to give freebies like that, that's for sure. 2 knights also go down, and we already have 3 tower elephants there on the battlefield as well. We haven't seen them yet.
They do take a while to arrive. And when they do, I think that's the moment where Kaz is just going to facepalm and GG, because like he doesn't have the answer to this at all. If you check the tower elephants, you'll realize that range units are terrible against them, and Kasva doesn't even want to see him. He calls GG. LucifroN goes 3-1 up as he takes the 4th map. But folks, remember that this is a $20 payout every map, so 5th one will still matter. Another map that you got to check out. I gotta say, Frisian Marshes, there's definitely some potential. I kind of liked it. When I looked at the drawings for each of the maps before you even saw these, it was probably my front runner for like a dry Arabia type variable map. And I don't know if you feel the same way, Lidakor. Do you feel like it, out of the 5 maps, it maybe fits that role the best?
Yeah, probably. As I said, when I started talking about this map at the beginning, I said that this is actually what Ancient Spires in many ways want it to be. A lot more food available, a lot more aggression towards those food deposits, a lot more focus on those pocket ecos. But we have seen a very interesting dynamics of these civilizations because I'm not gonna lie, before we have seen this game, I thought that French will be extremely powerful and probably the most big civilization here because you do get the discount on the mills, you do have the ability to control the map at the beginning of the game. I was genuinely afraid of this map being French mirrors all the time, but that's the reason why we're running these show matches, because we want to check out how the players play the map, and we want to check out how that plays out in the hands of pro players, make sure that the maps we implement into Road to Wololo are going to be as enjoyable for the players and the viewers as possible.
And we've definitely been getting some spicy meatballs to munch into so far. But folks, that is the end of this show match. Well, not the show map. There's still one more map to go in this show match, so make sure you stay tuned for that one. But before we move on to the next video, make sure that you hit the like, you comment down below. We want to know your opinions, what you think of these maps, what's your feedback as well, because it matters just as much from the community as us. And on top of that, make sure you follow EGC on all their social medias. It helps them grow, it helps them thrive. And if you want to catch the action live, be sure to check in every weekend all the way through to the end of September for high-tier Age of Empires 4 Pro action, where EGC will be providing that action at 15 GMT every weekend.